Good morning, everyone. The last financial year that we have information for, which is 2021-2022, the UK gave £48 million in foreign aid to China. This is utterly and completely ridiculous because China is a fully industrialized economy. They're part of the BRICS group of nations, which is now setting up an alternative currency system, economic leadership system, and group of nations to rival the G7. I can understand us giving emergency and disaster relief to countries, but the whole scheme of foreign aid is a nonsense. Most of it just disappears into projects that line the pockets of bureaucrats, and that's true wherever it's given. Some people justify giving foreign aid to Commonwealth countries in Africa, for example. I don't agree with any of it at all. I think we should just completely cut our foreign aid budget and trade, not aid. We need to build up the real economy of nations by trading with them and taking down trade barriers which harm African countries in particular. But when we come to China, there's absolutely no need for a penny of foreign aid to go to China. China could cope very well even if there was a disaster, an emergency that needed money to be brought in. They could pay for it and deal with it themselves. We don't need to assist China by donating money to them. Now, £48 million is a lot of money to an ordinary person. It isn't an awful lot of money compared to the whole basket of foreign aid that goes out every year. And in fact, the UK sends not millions but billions of pounds of foreign aid overseas. It's what we call overseas development these days rather than foreign aid, and a lot of it, it goes into things like wind farms and solar panels and reproductive rights, as they call them, which is actually supporting abortion centres in places around the world, and LGBT rights and these kind of things. That's what it goes to these days. Most foreign aid doesn't do what people think. It doesn't help much or even at all to give people food and water and medicine. And whatever medicines they do give are things like coerced injections, which is not actually medicine at all, in the sense of actually helping people to avoid chronic illness and have just basic nutrition and cleanliness. That would do far more than some of these things which masquerade as medicine these days. That's what our foreign aid overseas development budget goes to. The total budget's £14 billion. Now, it is shocking that 48 million of that, which is less than 1% of the total budget, goes to China. But it's just symbolic of the whole crazy system that there's now a law that was passed in the days of Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, saying that we have to give, by law, 0.7% of our GDP as overseas development or foreign aid. When there is so much wrong in this country ourselves, and we have a huge national debt. So all the money that we're sending abroad to China and other countries, Pakistan is also a recipient that it's a nuclear power. We're sending money to Pakistan and they spend way more than we give them on nuclear weapons and maintaining nuclear weapons. Why are we sending money to a country like that? China, Pakistan, clearly ridiculous examples of nations that we send foreign aid to. But we got it in law that we have to send whatever 0.7% of our GDP is to foreign aid, to overseas development. That money, as I said, it needs to be borrowed. We don't have the money because we have a national debt now of 2.5 trillion. That's another order of magnitude up the scale. and we're borrowing £100 billion a year now to pay for all the things that this country spends money on and to service our national debt. It's just a situation which is spiraling out of control. When we're borrowing £100 billion a year, it's ridiculous to borrow that money and send 14 billion of it straight out the door again on foreign aid. It's nonsense. No individual, no family, no household, no business could ever survive if it managed its finances it's so stupidly as this government does. And not just this government, the Blair and Brown government before it did the same. And now we've got the Conservatives under Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak, who are just carrying on this idiocy. So, giving money to China is nonsense, particularly considering there's a couple of things that China does spend its money on internally, which needs to be pointed out, which are quite awful. And I'm being polite in that word. The number one is the totalitarian social credit system that they're putting in place. I mean, they must be spending billions of pounds putting in place a total surveillance social credit system with face recognition, where you cannot do certain things. You're prohibited from things which we would consider and have always considered to be fundamental freedoms, like your right to assemble in a certain place, your right to go to a shop, your right to buy a train ticket, to go and travel somewhere, freedom of travel within your own country if you're a citizen, freedom of expression. People don't have that in China. You say the wrong thing, you get a red mark on your social credit score, and you're not allowed to purchase certain things. You're not allowed to go to certain places. If you're a multiple offender, you're not in the party, the Chinese Communist Party, your kids might not get the educational opportunities that they would get if you were a good boy or good girl, and you didn't say anything bad. You didn't say anything politically correct, whatever is politically incorrect in China, and so on. So this is a totalitarian system that is fundamentally, you don't have freedom in China. It's a totally different kind of society. But people in the West, associated with the World Economic Forum and so on, want to bring that system here into the West as well. We don't want it, and I don't think China should have it as well. But it's up to the Chinese people. But can you ever get out of that kind of system, even if you want to, when there's total surveillance, total control? Once those prison walls have come down, it's almost impossible to get out of. We should not be sending money to a country such as that, which is implementing that in their society. The other thing that is appalling that I hear that China is doing was in a report, I think first published by the Jamestown Foundation, but it was picked up by Associated Press. And it's also been picked up by a lot of pro-life organizations, that even though the notorious one-child policy that China had for decades has now been lifted in 2015, they now have a three-child policy, okay, which is a bit more lenient, but still, there's penalties if you're a woman and you have more than three children. It used to be one child. But in their western province, the Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live, the Uyghur Muslims live, there are still reports of forced abortions, women being implanted into IUDs to stop pregnancies, to sterilize the women, and these kind of things going on. Even though that's in general now lifted, it's not, coerced abortions, forced abortions are against the law in China. In practice, it's still going on in this western province, Xinjiang province. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure, but I don't speak Chinese. But that province. So that is going on, and it wouldn't be going on if it didn't have the nod from somebody. So giving money to a country where this is going on again is another reason that we shouldn't be sending money to China in terms of foreign aid and overseas development. Now, by all means, we should trade, as long as the trade is ethical in certain things. I would not trade in animal products with China. This is an issue that we're going to add to our manifesto soon. And some people, I think in the EU, were going to say that we should ban trade in animal products because of animal welfare in China is terrible, but they rode back from it because there was too much business to be done with China. But we need to make sure our business is ethical when we trade with countries, really ethical in terms of real human rights and real animal rights, etc. But this, to go back to the main point, the situation where the UK in masses of debt is giving foreign aid to China, which is now a wealthy country, is utterly ridiculous. We should stop it, and we should stop the whole, the whole gamut of foreign aid, to be honest, and just row that back to disaster and emergency relief, which should be done by the military, not through NGOs, which rake out and gouge money for themselves when they do it. It should be done through the military. And that's the right thing to do going forward. But we can start by cancelling our £48 million of foreign aid every year to China. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope that makes sense.